Hi everyone, welcome back to the Edgewater Avenue YouTube channel. In today's video, we are making the Athena one piece. So let's get started. Materials are super simple for this one. You will need swimwear fabric, 1/4 inch or 6mm swimwear elastic, a cutting tool and regular sewing supplies, as well as a seam ripper and a loop turner or safety pin. This pattern comes with two different coverage options. So when you print your pattern, you're just going to print the front piece and the back piece for the specific coverage option that you are choosing. For cutting, we're going to be cutting 2 in each pattern piece, and we will be cutting on the fold. A 1/4 inch or 6mm of seam allowance is included, so for this whole tutorial you will follow that unless it's otherwise stated. And the measurements for this strap piece are inside the directions of the pattern, so don't forget to cut that too. Once you're done cutting, you should have 2 front pieces, 2 back pieces, and 1 long strap piece. Now we're going to take our front pieces and match them with right sides together. We're going to sew along the following seams and attach our elastic to all of them, except for the center front. We will not want any elastic there, but we will be sewing it. And when we sew the top line of each bust piece, we want to stop our elastic about 5/8 of an inch to 3/4 of an inch, which is 1.5 to 1.9 centimeters away from the center front. This area is going to become a drawstring channel, so we don't want elastic there, making it all weird and bulky. While we're at it, we're also going to match our back pieces with right sides together and sew and attach elastic to the following seams. Then we'll fold our strap piece in half lengthwise and sew and attach elastic to it as well. But before I do any of that, I'm first going to use a basting stitch to tack all the seams I'm about to sew. I know this seems excessive, but I still do this even after sewing swimwear for over 10 years. It will yield a better result, and if you do happen to make any mistakes, you can go back now and rip a basting stitch much easier than having to rip an overlock stitch with elastic. So once the basting is all done, I'll go in and sew my final stitch and attach elastic. Here I'm using a 4-thread overlock stitch, but you can also use a zigzag stitch or any stretch stitch of your choice. You do not want to stretch the elastic here. We really want this to sew on nice and even. And it doesn't matter which side you attach the elastic to, but just make sure it's all on the same side. So here I am attaching it to my print side. Elastic application might be the trickiest part of sewing swimwear, so if you need some tips or have some questions, then I recommend watching my elastic series here on YouTube. Also, practice on scrap fabric. When we get to those top seams of the bust, we're going to sew until we get close to the center front, trim the elastic, and then lift the presser foot and leave the rest of the seam unsewn. Here I definitely didn't leave enough room, so I ended up going back and having to remove a couple stitches as well as that elastic. Then, since we're attaching elastic all to the same side, for the other side, the other bust piece, we have to line up our elastic and start sewing after the 5/8 of an inch mark, and then we can sew to the edge of the seam. And then finally, the last seam we're sewing here is that center front where there is no elastic, so just use a stretch stitch of your choice and sew the center front closed. Once this is all done, the top of your bust pieces should look something like this. As you can see, there's room to bring a strap through. Everything is sewn, so now we can take the front piece all the way to the right side. Keep in mind, it doesn't matter here if you do the front or the back piece, just choose one. And we're going to use a basting stitch and sew the side seams and the gusset closed. This is just going to make it easier in the next step with how slippery swimwear fabric is. Now that we're all basted, we're going to insert the front piece inside of the back piece so that right sides are together. So that means my print side on my front should be facing the print on my back. Then line up the gusset in each of the side seams and pin. We are going to sew the front and back together at the side seams and the gusset. This is another seam that can really benefit from using a basting stitch first. Otherwise, for the gusset, you can use a straight stitch to sew down all 4 layers of fabric. And then for the side seams, it's better to use a stitch capable of stretching. So my machine has a stretch stitch that I like to use, but you could also use a zigzag. So that fully attaches our front and back piece. And before moving on, we'll want to trim the excess along the side seams and gusset. Don't worry about getting super close to that stitch, just primarily focus on the beginning and end of the seams where there's usually a big chunk of elastic. Now we're going to take our seam ripper and rip a hole somewhere along an existing seam. I like to do it close to the gusset. I didn't do it here, but I recommend going back over either side of this hole to make sure those stitches are secured. Then through this hole, you'll take the entire suit to the right side. Finally, finish off the hole by stretching it and top stitching, or you can do an invisible stitch by hand. The next step is sewing our drawstring channel on the center front. So using a straight stitch, sew just a tiny bit over 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter away from the center front edge. As you sew, really try to make sure that the seam inside of the center front is stacked evenly, because if you sew the channel down and one side is rolling over, it's going to be even more exaggerated when the drawstring goes in. So really try and keep things as flat as possible here. And I didn't show this, but when you get to the bottom of the channel, it's worth backstitching a couple times because that area tends to stretch just a little bit when it's worn. Now take your loop turner or safety pin and turn your drawstring to the right side. Using your loop turner or safety pin once more, thread the strap through the drawstring channel. Once the straps are even, that completes the Athena one piece. Thank you very much for watching this video. This pattern has been one that I wasn't really planning on designing, but you guys really liked it. So please make sure to support. You can buy the Athena one piece pattern. It comes in all of the sizes that I offer. And yeah, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.